Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Arijeet Roy and Brian Reynolds. They are both partners at Guidehouse, and it's good to have you both with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Our topic is technology modernization, and that is a big topic across the federal government, across the commercial community that feeds the federal government. There's technology modernization funds specifically appropriated by Congress, and the general sense that people need to somehow move past even what they put in during the era, early electronic commerce, electronic government era, to where we stand now and what is state of the art. So let's begin with maybe defining the term. What is technology modernization once you've gotten rid of your COBOL mainframes?
Well, Tom, you're right. It's a broad topic, and it really focuses on the refactoring or replacement of legacy systems and technologies that are depreciated, replacing them with new technology stacks that better serve the customer and the agency's mission.
Yeah, and I think the extension of it is ultimately to provide better value for our clients' investments. In today's world, agencies are involved in a lot of manual processes, paperwork, which kind of adds to inherent inefficiencies in the process. And the ultimate goal of technology modernization is to help alleviate some of the concerns and shortfalls that lead from manual processes.
Right, so there's really two sides to it. In one way, you have depreciated equipment and networks and maybe older protocols, so you have to replace that anyway. But when you mention refactoring, that means you want to preserve some of the business logic that you had, even though you want it in a modern platform. But what Arijeet's added, I think, is that you may want to add functions, and there's digital functionality that wasn't available even for, so if you're refactoring would be the beginning of it, but you need to add in some ways. Fair to say?
Yeah, it's not just about introducing technically feasible solutions or just automating processes. It's really about providing an experience excellence. So understanding the customer's needs, understanding unmet needs, challenges, figuring out where we have resiliency, for example, challenges with the existing system, and making those changes and those improvements necessary to not just replace what's there today, but to improve what's there today.
Yeah, and security and the business climate, those have all changed also, and so that's another mitigating factor in favor of adding functionality and changing functionality.
Absolutely. I mean, while doing this is a journey from our perspective, technology modernization, where our clients and the industries today, we see it as a maturity in terms of capabilities and functions that can be provided through this megatrend that our clients can leverage ultimately without compromising on cybersecurity, on data, on assets like futuristic AI generative technologies.
Okay, we'll get to that one later in the interview, but what I wanted to ask you about now is, I mean, in looking across your client base, you deal with companies, they come to you, what are their pain points? What are the challenges? What's difficult about this that you encounter that they're coming to you for help with?
Well, I think the challenges really come from the multidisciplinary, focus that's required to deliver systems today. We certainly have had an agile movement here, and I think it's widely adopted now. But along with that has come a lot of capabilities and a lot of complexity. And along with those complexities comes challenges with workforce readiness. It comes, we end up in a place where to deliver effectively solutions, we not only need to understand how to do software development, but how to do infrastructure development, how to automate the provisioning of infrastructure, how to build resilient solutions that have DR postures, disaster recovery postures that are better than or necessary for today's mission. So there's a lot of challenges here, and those challenges come along with the trends, right? So there's trends we see around low code, certainly around cloud, but with those trends there's the complication of delivery.
Arijeet?
Right, and just to say, what we see today in the marketplace is a lot of effort goes into keeping the lights on. Existing older systems for our client base, they immense amount of money and efforts go into just making sure that things run and do not break. And in terms of the effort equation, I think the value is tilted. A lot of effort and value goes into existing systems, existing processes, and hence our client base are not able to move value for value, dollar for dollar, they don't get the value to invest in technology modernization. And the aim would be kind of shift that paradigm to focus more towards technology modernization and move away from running the railroad into more futuristic projects that can help them realize the value of their investments.
Yeah, so keeping the lights on kind of relates to the DR, disaster recovery. A lot of points in here. Let's go through them a little bit. Let's start with cloud. I mean, cloud in the federal sector was a little bit behind cloud adoption in the private sector, but now pretty much everybody's cloud. And the evidence of that is look how many vendors are chasing after cloud business. You know, almost anyone that ever built a computer is now in the cloud business. And cloud is a alternate hosting mechanism, but how is it also a modernization effort?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, cloud is the single biggest enabler of what we're seeing today with technology modernization, or the promise of technology modernization. It's providing the sort of elastic services, the scalability, the resiliency we need. You know, beyond the services and the hyper providers are providing here, you know, what they're also delivering, I think, for the first time, we're seeing in our industries is they're delivering best practice. They're delivering lessons learned. They're delivering patterns, and so we have now at our disposal the engineering excellence of some of the best minds, and then not just their services, but how best to assemble those services. So I really do think for the first time through cloud we're seeing excellence in infrastructure and in application development patterns, and not just products, not just services to be bought, but real discipline, real patterns, and real intellect being brought to bear and shared with entire industries and with the government.
Yeah, the question is, are they actually sharing it? Because sometimes they are fiercely competitive with one another.
I think so, yeah. I mean, my experience with the hyper providers is very balanced, and I think they, across the board, are committed to excellence and continuous improvement, and really have bought into some of those best management ideas. So it's not just about providing technology; it's really about providing, a better customer experience and a better cost point for those services.
Yeah. So Arijeet, that would seem to say then that the idea of modernizing your data center as some kind of a separate activity really needs to morph into making it emulate the cloud in all of those architectures and practices.
Absolutely. I think at some level it may be thought that cloud is just moving the data center from one place to another place. However, to Brian's point, what is important is all the other services, the best practices, as well as what is important is a lot of stuff in IT across the IT value chain can be very similar activities. And what the cloud has enabled is help businesses focus on the functionality that they want and making some of the other activities in IT more, I would say, easy to achieve. And the focus has shifted more from, just making sure that I spin up a server or I think of a system to more around somebody is there to take care of all those rudimentary stuff so that I can focus on building the applications, building the solutions that I need for my business.
Yeah, I mean, I think cloud, to bring in an economic term, sort of predictive productivity frontier, the idea of what's the most value I can deliver with the resources that an organization has. Cloud, I think, really is an amplifier, an accelerator of that. I think our organizations are able to, through cloud, do so much more with the resources they have, and to maintain those resources, to refresh and regenerate those resources and not be left with depreciated tech after just a couple of years. So they're shifting the focus from infrastructure management to the experience of the user, and I think that's really important.
Sure, and that I think relates to the workforce issue that you mentioned a moment ago. At one time, your IT people, there's a time when they needed to know how to design systems that could swap blocks of code in and out of memory for virtual machines because mainframe capacity was limited. The skills needed today, especially to use all of this cloud stuff, seem so remote from that. So maybe discuss the workforce issues as part of modernization.
Well, I mean, I think the Cloud Smart strategy, several years ago pointed out really three, prohibitors for cloud adoption. Workforce is the first. Trusted internet connections was the third, or second, and then security postures of organizations was the third. So, I do think the multidisciplinary nature of modern software development and cloud competencies is an absolute factor in how productive organizations both client and service providers, are or can be. It is the limiter, I think, right now, and I think it will be for some period of time. That's why you see those sorts of resources in such high demand.
Yeah, multidisciplinary means it's you almost need to have a philosophic or overarching approach, and not so much a technical approach purely.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and the composition of teams has changed drastically, right? I mean, it's not just having folks who understand patterns for software development, but understanding the environments they're deploying on, how to take advantage of elastic resources, how to auto-scale, how to make sure that the solution is resilient and take advantage of those services that make it resilient. So there's a level of smartness required to effectively deliver technology modernization that I think is unprecedented, honestly. And I think multidisciplinary in a lot of ways, not just in technology. I mean, the way we approach software development now with CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery. I mean, this is borrowing on the best practices of supply chain or of factory concepts. So you're seeing throughput accounting, which we use in Agile to make sure that we're delivering the best value with the least investment and with the least operating expense. These concepts, financial concepts, but now your engineers are cognizant of these things. They're aware of them. They're not just working on and focusing on being technology engineers, but they're focusing on being, purveyors of a new experience, a better experience, and a more cost-effective solution or experience.
Yeah, it's almost like switching musical instruments. You need to know what the capabilities and strategies and techniques of that new one are, and you can't bring what you had before to it really to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the workforce question is one of the biggest questions that we have to think about when it comes to taking advantage of some of these modern technologies like cloud. And from our perspective, I think it has to be two ways. One is internal focused, where our agencies, teams have to upskill themselves to come abreast with some of these latest technologies. And second is to create, the ecosystem of training and vendors and participants who bring a best athlete strategy to people who can really actually deliver the work, and the paradigm of continuously learning and keeping ourselves abreast with some of these latest technologies, because those are moving faster than anything that any of us could learn.
All right, we've got some more to cover, but first we're going to take a short break. My guests today are Arijeet Roy and Brian Reynolds. They are both partners at Guidehouse. I'm Tom Temin on the Evolving Complexity series, Technology Modernization, sponsored by Guidehouse, here on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Evolving Complexity series, Technology Modernization, sponsored by Guidehouse, here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Arijeet Roy and Brian Reynolds, both partners at Guidehouse, and I'm Tom Temin. And I want to ask you about artificial intelligence, because we've talked about so many of the big trends coming into IT development and modernization, but the emergence of AI has really caught everybody, I think, by surprise with how fast it's come on, and that was accelerated by not just the AI emergence, but the generative AI emergence, and it's not obvious how that can help in technology modernization, but it's starting to come into focus. So maybe discuss that whole trend.
Sure. I mean, I'll take a start here. I mean, I think certainly there's ample material evidence that shows generative AI is accretive to the software development process. So, developer productivity is or can be absolutely improved through the use of generative AI, and that is especially the case when we're talking about jumpstarting or the draft writing of code or the refactoring of code. But there's lots of uses for AI and lots of potential here for AI. I would suggest a pedestrian use of it is just a generation of documentation around the code, inspecting a code base and being able to productively generate code to help make that code more maintainable. Certainly the examination of customer sentiment data, for example, and the identification of necessary features or operational changes is a perfect application for AI. I think it's commonplace today for us to use AI to examine observability, infrastructure observability, and application telemetry data. Make sure that so that we can use the AI to recommend improvements to our resource configurations or our service deployments. So these are three examples. A couple of others would be, migration to the cloud, as we've talked about, is a very important part of many organizations' efforts to remove technical debt and to modernize their estates, their IT estates. And so using AI to assess the code bases of their legacy systems, assess their complexity, understand dependencies, and plan migrations is a good use. And of course, the ability to regenerate code, a code base within a modern technology stack, equivalent code in a modern technology stack is a practical use of AI. I would say at Guidehouse we're looking past that. I mean, those are mechanical, I think, to some degree, and we really are looking at how do we responsibly apply AI to change the Agile process. If I think I'm like many Agile practitioners, and what we find is, while Agile is absolutely practical and a useful way of approaching technology modernization, it's also quite laborious and demanding of some roles. For example, product owners. My experience is product owners often have another job, ancillary responsibilities. And so, to the degree that we can alleviate the demands on a product owner by interrogating or inspecting a code base or existing documentation and generating the beginnings of our backlog, or to assess whether or not, when we point stories and estimate how much work is involved, whether that jives with sort of our historical experience delivering similar sorts of user stories is another use. So I think there's absolutely mechanical uses, but there are some process and cultural improvements we can make in the Agile process that come with AI.
Yeah, that's really a great list, but there's a distinction I noticed in them, and this is my question. When you talk about documentation, for example, or documenting old code, which was my next question, you answered it already. Can this be applied retroactively to code that nobody understands anymore, that has turned into spaghetti over the decades? But that is generating language, English. In the sense of generating new code, it's generating code. So does the term large language model, can the language be code as well as the English or whatever, Chinese, whatever the language could be?
Yeah, it actually can be. There are models today, there are tools today through AI which are generating code. I think it comes down to the quality of the code, like Brian's point. As we look across the IT value chain, there will be activities which are mechanical, and we think that the first users would be those low-hanging fruits when it comes to documentation or looking at a code base. The whole idea of generating code using code, which is AI, would be something that still needs a little bit of maturity. There are models out there that are generating good amount of code. It will come down to the complexity of the business processes, as well as to the points that we discussed in terms of the digital skills and the maturity of the organizations to use those AI tools responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, this, just in the last year, we've seen all the providers deliver, code development and solutions based on generative AI that are quite effective,
Yeah, so they're using it in the generation of their own products, in other words.
And they're offering it to providers who are looking to build solutions on top of their services.
Yeah, so this all points to this idea that you have postulated, and that is the industrializing of the technology production chain for modernization. Because modernization exists in time, and nobody has enough money or time, so the less time you get, that you spend, the less money you expend, and the closer and quicker you get to the value that Arijeet mentioned earlier on. So discuss that idea of industrializing modernization so that it's not so much of a craft process that's so demanding, as you said, on people's time, which nobody has enough of.
Yeah. Well, I would say one of the things we do at Guidehouse is we really do look across industries. We do look at both the commercial and the government industries we serve. We take lessons learned from those experiences, and from that we are, specifically aiming at delivering standardized processes that are proven and that work, right? So the best practices of commercial and government brought together in standardization. And by industrialization, we really are talking about a factory concept. When we think about a factory, there are disciplines that have long been in place, Six Sigma, for example, Lean, that are aimed at reducing work in process, reducing inventory, improving throughput. This is always done by removing process variability. Right? So we take the same concepts here. We are very dedicated to standardizing the way we go about technology modernization, removing the need for heroes on projects, improving the predictability of our delivery efforts, improving the reusability of the components that we deliver. Automating everything is sort of the focus for us. I mean, and you see that across industry with CI/CD, with infrastructure as code. This is a concept that's being widely adopted today. So really, by industrialization or the factory concept, we really are talking about standardization, creating the opportunity for reuse, creating the opportunity for automation, and importantly, measurement. So really measurement and knowing how well you're working, how productive you are, and making the necessary changes. Continuous improvement is a key part of that, the same way it is a part of Six Sigma or Lean or any of those sort of concepts. I think beyond sort of technical, how do we improve the supply chain of software and technology modernization, the shift in focus, for our professionals is taking an economic view of what's built, making sure that what we deliver has the biggest or best value. That means we look at business value, we look at the risk we can reduce, we look at the time criticality, we look at how much effort is required to deliver the solutions. We look at inspect and adapt metrics so that we understand how well does our agile process work? Do we have defects beyond what we expect? Are we predictable in what we plan and deliver? Are we productive? Do we have good velocity? These are all concepts that are about managing with data, and that's at the heart of what we mean by sort of the modernization factory.
It's almost like software is the last domain not affected by the great Edward W. Deming's teachings. Is really what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. I mean, Agile is absolutely based on Lean, right? The whole idea of what we're trying to do with Agile is remove the 8 wastes of Lean along the way. So it's absolutely the Deming's application of Deming's concepts.
Arijeet?
Yeah, and I think the single biggest thing in the factory concept is the focus on quality. It is very difficult to come the most difficult thing in software delivery is making sure that it is of the highest quality, and that is where the concept of moving away from processes to products came into being, where the focus on software is to build a high quality product. The factory concept kind of takes the quality concept into heart, and all the items that Brian mentioned. The ultimate focus is we want to focus on delivering, creating, building software that has the best quality in the market. That ultimately does not, the quality does not depreciate with time. That it's done correct, but then it's done correct every time, every opportunity is done right, the first time as well as all the other times that our clients use the software.
And so the word is predictability, right? That's what we're trying to produce here.
All right, a great note to end the discussion on. Thank you both very much. My guests today have been Arijeet Roy and Brian Reynolds, both partners at Guidehouse. I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Guidehouse.